Sir, those are just costume jewelry, right? You don't really expect a discount for that, Tyler Jensen said, barely glancing at the medals on Elias Ford's jacket. Elias, leaning on his cane, replied quietly, "They're not costumes. They represent 30 years of service." Tyler rolled his eyes. "Sure they do. Full price." Elias paid in silence and stepped outside, settling onto a bench. The coffee sat untouched. It wasn't about the money, it was the sting of being dismissed. Then inside the store, the cheerful music suddenly cut off. A pause, silence. Then a voice rang out, steady, commanding, "Attention all patrons and staff of Harvest and Hill Market. This is General Raymond Hale." And in that moment, everything changed. The air grew still. Respect was about to walk in, and it wasn't asking permission. Elias Ford had long since stepped away from the battlefield, but the war never quite left him. In a quiet, modest apartment on the third floor of an aging brick complex, he lived a life of stillness and routine. The walls were lined with books, history mostly, and a few dog-eared volumes of military strategy he had marked up in his younger days. A single-frame photograph sat above his desk, a unit of young soldiers, all grinning, frozen in time. Most of them never made it back. Every morning, Elias woke at 5. Old habits die hard, and after 30 years in the Army, his body still stirred before the sun. He brewed strong black coffee, sat at the kitchen table, with a copy of the Stars and Stripes, or whatever newspaper the corner store still carried, and let the morning light pour in through the window. His left leg ached every time it rained a permanent gift from a roadside bomb in Kandahar. He rarely spoke of it. Pain to him was just another form of silence. His cane, a carved oak stick with a leather-wrapped grip, was more than a walking aid. It was a companion. He refused newer lightweight models. This one had seen him through 2 VA hospitalizations and a long, uneven recovery. The orthopedic shoes were less sentimental but necessary. Even a simple walk to the store could become a tactical exercise in balance and endurance. Most days, Elias visited the local VA clinic to check in on his prescriptions and have quiet conversations with other veterans, men and women, who understood what it meant to come home, but never quite arrive. They'd nod silently in the waiting room, sharing more in that gesture than many civilians did in full conversations. He never complained, never demanded to be seen. That day, the one with the coffee shop had started like all the rest. A slight chill in the air, boots on, by 6 cane in hand jacket pressed. But there was something else that morning. It was the anniversary of Operation Panther Ridge, one of the last missions he led before retirement. A hard mission, one that cost lives, one that changed him. On impulse, he pinned a small row of service ribbons inside his coat. Not for display, just for himself, for remembrance. He wasn't looking for recognition when he stepped into the Harvest and Hill Market. Just a warm cup of coffee and maybe a quiet moment to read the front page in peace. But peace doesn't always come when you expect it. And respect, that too, had a strange way of arriving. Unannounced, uninvited, and sometimes wearing stars. Harvest and Hill Market was the kind of place that didn't just sell groceries, it curated them. Nestled in the heart of a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood, it had become the go-to spot for organic produce, artisan breads, and imported teas with labels in foreign languages no one could pronounce, but everyone felt proud to display in their pantry. The shelves gleamed under carefully positioned pendant lights. The air smelled like sourdough and citrus. Jazz played softly over the speakers. To Elias Ford, it felt like stepping into a world that wasn't built with him in mind. Still, he appreciated quiet places, the ones where you could browse in peace. He wasn't there for imported honey or oat milk, just a cup of coffee. He had heard it was strong, clean, and worth the price. More importantly, they advertised a senior and veteran discount on a placard by the door. "We honor those who serve, ask at checkout." Elias made his way to the coffee counter, walking slow and deliberate with the help of his cane. His coat was buttoned, but just enough of his ribbons peeked through to be seen if someone looked closely. Behind the counter stood a young man, early 20s, angular haircut, fitted black shirt under a store apron. His name tag read Tyler in a bold sans serif font. Tyler was the kind of employee who considered eye contact optional and customer service conditional. Elias stepped up, gave a polite nod. "Just a large coffee, black." Tyler tapped a few buttons on the register, distracted. "That'll be $4.75. Elias reached slowly into his wallet, withdrew his worn VA identification card, and opened his jacket slightly to show the row of miniature service ribbons beneath. I believe there's a veteran's discount. Tyler blinked at the card, then at the ribbons. His lip curled. He tilted his head sideways, squinting. These, he asked, gesturing vaguely. Sir, those are just, like costume jewelry, right? Elias didn't answer immediately. He lowered the card, adjusted his posture, then replied evenly, They represent 30 years of service. Tyler scoffed and waved his hand. Sure, gumball prizes. That doesn't change the price. We need a real military ID for the discount, not whatever this thing is. There was a moment so brief it could have passed unnoticed where the room held its breath. A woman arranging tulips at a nearby display paused. A man with a cart full of kombucha looked up. An older couple in the bread aisle seemed to register something, but chose silence. Elias stood there unmoving. He didn't plead, didn't argue. He simply said, That's a valid federal ID, and those medals were earned. Tyler rolled his eyes and tapped the screen again harder this time. Well, it's still full price, unless you want to talk to corporate about your souvenir pins. From the manager's booth just a few feet away, Dana Whitmore in her sleek black blazer and oversized glasses looked up from her laptop. Her gaze hovered for a moment, then returned to her spreadsheet without a word. The silence after that was louder than anything Tyler had said. Elias nodded once slowly. He reached into his pocket and counted out exact change. His hand trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from restraint. He handed the bills over without another word. Tyler handed him the cup and receipt with performative politeness. Have a nice day, Sergeant, he said, sarcasm dripping from every syllable. Elias walked away, his cane clicking softly on the polished concrete floor. He moved past the shelves of granola and gluten-free crackers to the small seating area near the window. The coffee steamed in his hand. He didn't drink it. He sat with his back straight jaw, set eyes unfocused. Around him the store moved on like nothing had happened. Conversations resumed. Jazz filled the void. But something had changed for him at least. The bitterness of the coffee paled compared to the taste in his mouth now. It wasn't just about the insult. It was about what it meant that a young man could look at the symbols of service and see only decoration. That a manager could witness quiet cruelty and return to her Excel sheet. That people who enjoyed the freedoms others bled for could forget, even mock the price. And Elias Ford. He'd lived long enough to know that disrespect wears many faces, some loud, some quiet, but all of them, everyone deserved to be answered. He looked down at the cup, then at the medals on his chest. Maybe today wouldn't be so quiet after all. The bench outside Harvest and Hill Market was made of cold metal, more aesthetic than comfortable, placed beside a row of neatly trimmed hedges and overpriced succulents. Elias Ford sat there, coffee cooling beside him, not touched since Tyler handed it over. His cane rested between his knees, both hands folded over it, knuckles pale. He wasn't angry in the way most people understood anger. He wasn't going to raise his voice or cause a scene. That wasn't his style, never had been. But something had been cracked open inside him during that encounter, something deeper than pride. The ribbons on his coat felt heavier than usual. He reached up and gently adjusted one that had come slightly askew. Bronze star, Purple Heart, Army Commendation. To a boy behind a register, they were shiny trinkets. To Elias, they were memories, names, losses. He exhaled slowly and pulled out a small, rugged flip phone. It wasn't modern, just sturdy, reliable, like most things he trusted. He thumbed through the contacts until he came to one labeled, Simply Hail, Jen Rhett. He hadn't dialed it in years, not since the retirement ceremony, not since the last reunion where they'd shared scotch and stories too heavy for civilians to hear. Raymond Hale, 4 stars, combat veteran, former commander of the 3rd Infantry Division, a man who had once stood shoulder to shoulder with Elias in fire and ash. When Hale retired, he'd handed Elias a card and said, If the world ever forgets who you are, call me anytime, anywhere. Elias had never thought he'd need to use it. But today was different. He pressed the call button. The phone rang twice. Then came the voice, gravelly, firm, alert, even after all these years. Ray Hale. General, it's Elias Ford. Sergeant Major Ford. From Panther Ridge. There was a pause, then warmth flooded through the line. Elias. Good Lord, it's damn good to hear your voice. You all right? I'm mostly all right, sir. Elias's tone stayed even, but the tremor beneath it wasn't lost on Hale. I had a situation, nothing physical, just disrespect. Public, disgraceful, and briefly clearly he described it. The store, the clerk, the comment, the manager's silence. He wasn't looking for pity. He didn't want revenge. What he wanted was simple someone to know, someone who understood. General Hale was silent for a few beats. Then his voice sharpened. You still there? Yes, sir. Good. Don't move. I'm 2 blocks away from that store. Meeting the mayor in 20, but that can wait. Stay where you are, Elias. 10 minutes. The line clicked. Elias stared down at the phone in his hand. It had been a short call, barely 3 minutes, but he knew as surely as he knew how to field strip a rifle in his sleep, everything was about to change. The chime of the front door at Harveston Hill Market barely registered to most inside. It rang dozens of times a day, always signaling another customer eager for fresh-baked bread or imported olives. But this time something felt different. The man who stepped in wasn't dressed in a uniform, but his posture, his presence, those were unmistakable. General Raymond Hale walked with the measured authority of someone used to commanding battalions, not browsing produce. His tailored navy suit was crisply pressed, his silver hair combed neatly back, but his eyes were sharp as ever. Not angry, not emotional, just focused, controlled. No one stopped him as he walked purposefully past the salad bar, past the kombucha fridge, and through the open hallway toward the manager's station. Dana Whitmore, who had just resumed working on her laptop, looked up and froze. Excuse me, General Hale said in a firm but courteous tone. I need access to your intercom system, now. Dana blinked. I'm sorry. Who are you? He pulled a small leather wallet from his jacket, flipping it open to reveal a military identification. Not current, but unmistakable. And beneath that, a card bearing the seal of a Veterans Foundation with his name 4 stars and a small Department of Defense insignia. I'm General Raymond Hale, retired, and I'm here on behalf of a veteran who was humiliated in this store 20 minutes ago. I'd like to speak to your customers and your staff. She hesitated. He didn't. With a flicker of old instinct, Hale found the store's PA mic set beside the register on the admin counter. He pressed the button. A short, static click replaced the music overhead. And then silence. The kind of silence that makes people pause mid-sentence, mid-step. Attention all patrons and staff of Harveston Hill Market, his voice echoed through every speaker, rich and commanding. This is General Raymond Hale. Heads turned. A cashier stopped scanning. A father placing oranges in his basket looked up. Tyler Jensen, who was in the middle of telling his co-worker about the old guy with the fake medals, froze. I am currently on the premises, and I am here because one of your patrons, Sergeant Major Elias Ford, a decorated war veteran, was ridiculed and dismissed at your counter for presenting the very medals he earned in service to this country. You could have heard a pin drop. This gentleman served with distinction for over 30 years. He carries the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart, not from a costume store, but from combat zones most of you will never have to walk through. Today he asked for a modest discount you publicly advertised for veterans, and he was mocked for doing so. General Hale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone held more weight than volume ever could. A clerk referred to his ribbons as gumball prizes. A manager witnessed it and did nothing. I'm not here to cause a scene. I'm here to correct a wrong. Customers stared. Some were ashamed, others visibly angry. General Hale continued each word calm, deliberate, unwavering. In this country, we may not agree on much, but if there is one thing that must remain sacred, it is respect for those who sacrifice for our freedom. Today that respect was absent, and then he released the button. The line clicked off. The jazz music didn't resume. No one moved. No one spoke. Because truth when spoken without apology doesn't echo, it lands. The moment General Hale stepped out from behind the manager's booth, the energy inside Harveston Hill Market shifted. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't flanked by security or holding a megaphone. But the authority that clung to him was undeniable, earned, not demanded. Tyler Jensen stood frozen by the espresso machine, his smirk gone, The color drained from his face. The easy swagger he'd worn earlier had vanished. His coworker backed away slightly, not wanting to be caught in the line of fire. Dana Whitmore approached the general, slowly clutching a tablet in her hand like a shield. Her voice trembled slightly. "General Hale, I had no idea that." He raised a hand, not in anger, but to cut through the fog of excuses before they had a chance to form. "Miss Whitmore," he said evenly, "you saw it happen, and you chose your spreadsheet over your responsibility." Donna's mouth opened, then shut. He turned to Tyler. "And you, Hale," said, his gaze narrowing, "mocked a combat veteran's medals in public. You insulted 30 years of sacrifice as if it were nothing. You may not have understood what you were looking at, but ignorance is no excuse for contempt." Tyler tried to speak. "Sir, I didn't mean you said gumball prizes." Hale's tone was flat. "Let's not pretend this was a misunderstanding." Behind them, shoppers had gathered. Some began filming quietly. Others simply watched silent. The room felt like a courtroom, one where respect was on trial. Elias Ford was escorted back into the store by a younger employee who had overheard the speech and, perhaps out of guilt or decency, had gone to find him. When Elias entered, cane in hand, the general's stern face softened. "Sergeant Major Hale said, I'm sorry this happened to you, but I assure you it will not go unanswered." He gestured for Elias to stand beside him, then turned to Dana and Tyler. "First, you will offer Sergeant Major Ford a direct, unequivocal, and public apology. Not because I demand it, because it's the bare minimum of decency." Tyler swallowed hard and stepped forward. "Sergeant Major, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I shouldn't have said what I did. It was wrong." Dana followed suit, her voice shaking more from embarrassment than sincerity. "Mr. Ford, I apologize for what you experienced here today. It does not reflect our values as a company." Elias gave a small nod. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Second General Hale continued, now addressing the room. "This store will be making a $25,000 donation under the name of Sergeant Major Elias Ford to the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. My office will oversee the transfer. That amount is non-negotiable." Dana blinked, stunned. "That's a significant sum. It's also the cost of dignity. Consider it restitution." Then he added louder so every ear could hear, "And third, this store is now closed for the day." Gasps spread across the floor. Hale went on. "Every staff member will report to the conference room in 15 minutes, where they will attend a mandatory sensitivity and veteran respect training session. It will be led by a retired Marine gunnery sergeant I personally selected because respect can be taught. And clearly it must be." Tyler looked like he wanted to disappear. Dana opened her mouth to protest. "But sir, this is a peak business." "Then consider today your cost of education," Hale said sharply. "You can reopen tomorrow. Hopefully better." The general didn't wait for agreement. He turned back to Elias and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I told you, Sergeant Major. Anytime. Anywhere." And he meant it. The doors of Harvest and Hill Market stayed shut for the rest of the day. No customers, no transactions, no music drifting through the aisles. Instead, inside the break room, usually reserved for birthday cakes and dull HR videos, every staff member sat in rows, backs straight, notebooks out, eyes fixed on the man at the front of the room. He wasn't from corporate. He was Master Gunnery Sergeant Robert Gunny Torres, retired Marine. 40 years of service etched into his voice and his spine. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. Every sentence he delivered cut straight through the air. "This isn't just about Elias Ford," he began. "It's about every man and woman who served, who walked through fire and came back with less than they left with. Sometimes that loss is visible. Sometimes it's not. Your job as citizens, especially as those who profit from the freedom their sacrifice purchased, is to honor it." The training session lasted 4 hours. It wasn't just a lecture. It was stories. It was faces. It was the history behind the medals, the significance of the ribbons, the unspoken costs carried home in silence. By the end, even the most indifferent employees sat quieter, thought deeper. Tyler Jensen, who had scoffed at medals earlier that morning, was one of them. He hadn't said much during the session, but he didn't scroll his phone, didn't whisper to coworkers. And when Gunny Torres passed around a small plaque listing the most common combat awards and their meanings, Tyler held it longer than most. His fingers lingered on the engraving of the bronze star. Maksha Shuriwak. The next day, the market reopened with a new sign by the entrance. We proudly offer 15% off for all active duty and veteran customers. Thank you for your service. Below it, in smaller text in honor of Sergeant Major Elias Ford, the community responded faster than anyone expected. Local news stations ran the story "Retired General Shuts Down Market Over Veteran Insult." The clip of General Hale's intercom speech went viral, shared by veterans groups, military families, and everyday citizens who recognized dignity when they saw it. Letters poured in. Veterans from nearby towns came to shop. Parents brought in their kids and pointed to the medals on the cardboard cutout of Elias Ford, now standing near the checkout line, a small biography printed underneath. Tyler stayed on staff. General Hale hadn't demanded he be fired, and Elias hadn't either. They believed in consequences, but also in growth. A week after the incident, Tyler approached Elias, who had returned to the market for a quiet cup of coffee. This time, Tyler brought it to him without being asked. "No charge," he said simply. "And I read about the Silver Star, sir." "I didn't know." "I should have." Elias looked up, his expression unreadable for a second. Then he nodded. "Knowing now is what matters." As for Dana Whitmore, she instituted a permanent annual training program for all new hires on veteran recognition and respect, conducted by veterans from the local community. She also ensured every store bulletin board included a profile of a local veteran, updated monthly. In an interview later with the local news, she said, "It should never have taken this incident. But we're not going backward. Not again." Something had shifted, not just in the policies, but in the people. Because one man, quiet and dignified, decided that silence was no longer the right answer. And because one general showed that even after retirement, the mission to protect and defend never truly ends. The sun had shifted low in the sky by the time General Raymond Hale and Sergeant Major Elias Ford stepped out of Harveston Hill Market. The storm had passed, but neither man spoke as they walked side by side down the sidewalk. They didn't need to. Soldiers don't always fill the silence with noise sometimes. Presence is enough. 2 blocks down sat a small, unassuming cafe, nothing fancy, just brick walls, chipped paint, and the smell of real food. The kind of place where the waitress calls you "sir" without sarcasm and refills your coffee before you ask. They took a table by the window, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the checkered tablecloth. Hale ordered 2 plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes without asking. He already knew what Elias liked. For a while they talked like old friends do, slowly with pauses, letting each sentence carry its weight. "You remember Carter Ridge?" Elias asked, stirring sugar into his coffee with the handle of his spoon. Hale nodded. "Lost 6 good men there. You dragged Sergeant Montoya out under fire. I still don't know how you managed that with a busted knee." Elias smiled faintly. "Montoya weighed less than my gear back then." They both chuckled, but it faded quickly. "I think about them," Elias said. "The ones who didn't come home. Every morning, really. And then something like today happens, and I wonder, did the world just move on?" Hale set his fork down and leaned back. His eyes met Elias's across the table. "No," he said. "It forgets sometimes. But it hasn't moved on. Not when there are people like you who still carry it, and not while I'm still breathing." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather folder, sleek, well-worn, and practical. Inside was a printed packet, a card, and a contact list. "This," he said, sliding it across the table, "is from my foundation. We've got a team: VA claims advisors, housing support, peer counselors. No red tape. No waiting lists. You call and they act." Elias raised an eyebrow. "I get all my meds on time. Don't need a handout." Hale smiled. "It's not a handout. It's a lifeline. We both know too many who slipped through the cracks. I'm making damn sure you're not one of them." Elias looked at the folder, then at Hale. "You always were better at the politics." Hale's tone softened, but his voice remained firm. "And you were always the reason the rest of us came back in one piece." They sat in silence again, eating slowly, surrounded by the hum of the diner. Then as they stood to leave, Hale clasped Elias's shoulder with a grip that spoke volumes. "No one gets left behind, not on my watch," he said. Elias didn't reply, but the quiet nod he gave said everything. For all the pain, for all the weight he'd carried alone, there was now one certainty: he wasn't alone anymore. A week after the incident, the entrance of Harveston Hill Market looked very different. Just to the right of the automatic doors, framed in dark oak and lit by a small overhead spotlight, hung a new sign. Simple, elegant, clear, in honor of our veterans, especially Sergeant Major Elias Ford. We proudly offer a permanent 15% discount to all active duty military and veterans. Your service is never forgotten here. Beneath it sat a small bronze plaque bearing Elias's name, and the words "Respect is not a courtesy. It's a duty." Every customer who walked in saw it, and whether they noticed it out of habit or reverence, most paused. Some removed their hats, a few even saluted. The decision to make the discount permanent hadn't come from corporate. Dana Whitmore, the once distracted manager, pushed for it herself. After sitting through Gunny Torres's training and speaking with Elias in private, something changed in her, something that had been long overdue. She promised publicly in a press release picked up by local news. Our store will be known for its quality products, yes, but more than that, for the way we treat those who've sacrificed for us. Tyler Jensen's name didn't appear in any articles, but among the staff people noticed the shift. He now stood when veterans entered. He learned to identify medals not because he had to, but because he wanted to understand. And once a week, without fail, he helped organize donated goods for a local veteran shelter quietly, with no posts or fanfare. The ripple didn't stop at the storefront. News of what happened spread through town and beyond. A local newspaper ran the headline, "General walks into market and teaches a lesson in honor." That article was shared thousands of times online, picked up by Military Pages veterans groups and local news stations across the country. At first, it was about the drama, a retired general shutting down a store. But what made it last, what made it matter, was the heart behind it. Veterans began visiting from nearby counties. Some came just to shake Elias Ford's hand. Others simply to shop in a place where they knew they'd be seen, not ignored. Parents brought their kids and pointed out the display by the register, now featuring a rotating spotlight on different veterans in the community, starting with Elias. The staff learned the difference between a silver star and a bronze star. They learned to say thank you for your service without sounding rehearsed. And Elias, he still walked with a cane, still kept to his routines. But something was lighter now. Not because people finally noticed him, but because they noticed what he stood for. In a town that had forgotten how to show gratitude, one moment of cruelty had opened the door for 1,000 quiet acts of recognition. And in time, it became more than just a story. It became a local legend. In a world moving faster than ever, it's easy to forget the quiet ones, the men and women who gave the best years of their lives in dusty deserts and cold jungles, who returned not seeking praise but peace. But peace, as we've seen, doesn't always meet them with open arms. Sometimes it greets them with indifference, or worse, disrespect. So we must ask, what do we lose as a society when we stop honoring those who sacrificed for us? We lose more than tradition. We lose the moral backbone that reminds us freedom isn't free, that it was bought and paid for in sweat, pain, and memory by people like Elias Ford, whose medals are not ornaments, but echoes of battlefields too many of us will never see. And here's the truth, those medals still matter. But do we still understand them? Do we teach our children what a Bronze Star stands for? Or why a Purple Heart means more than just injury? It means someone chose to stand between danger and home? Or are these just decorations now glimpsed and dismissed? This story isn't just about one man being mocked or one general stepping in. It's about the quiet strength behind every uniform, the battles fought long after the war ends, the dignity that still demands our respect. If you've ever seen something similar, if you've watched someone stand tall while the world overlooked them, we invite you to share that moment in the comments. Your voice matters. Your stories keep their legacy alive. Because this isn't just Elias Ford's story. It belongs to every veteran who's walked unseen among us, and to every citizen who chooses to see them. Let this story be a reminder that honor doesn't need an invitation. It only needs someone brave enough to act. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of something deeper we all carry as Americans, then please subscribe, leave a like, and help us share more stories that speak for the silent stand-up, for the forgotten, and honor the quiet strength behind every uniform. Thank you for watching and remembering.